Well, Allison, it is so nice to be reunited with you here in Las Vegas. I think that was actually the last time we saw each other was MJ BizCon of 2019.
Oh my goodness.
That was a crazy MJ BizCon. That was so much fun.
So much fun.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for doing, that special episode specifically on drying and curing and just the experiences you've had through COVID. I wanted to kind of step back a little bit in this interview and just talk about horticulture in general and cannabis in general and how we met and bonded. And so, yeah, I'm just going to ask you first, how did you get into horticulture in the first place? And where are you from?
Okay, so if the accent doesn't say enough, I am from South Carolina. I don't think necessarily the question is how did I get into it. It was more of me trying to stay out of it from the day I was born.
Interesting.
Yeah, believe that or not. I was born into a green thumb industry, a green thumb family. My grandparents grew cotton on one side. On the other side, my grandma was a florist. Growing up, my mom had like a large ball and burlap tree farm that, every holiday and every second I wasn't in school or doing sports, I had to go and work. And so, grew up knowing how to put on string to a weed eater and drive a tractor and change tires, and
which are a farmer.
Yes, which are all fantastic skills to have. But at the same time, I was like, I do not want to do this the rest of my life. In high school, my mom had built greenhouses, and so on one hand, I really loved it and I was good at it, but on the other hand, I was like, I just want to do something different. So I actually went to school to be a vet.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I am a hardcore animal lover.
Okay.
And so year through being a pre-vet, I decided I cannot handle putting down animals because I did, some internships and every part of it I loved. Dog, I'm crazy about dogs. But when it comes to the end of the life part, I would just be a wreck every single day. So I pivoted, didn't know what I wanted to do. And so Clemson being an ag school, I said, okay, well, I've been, bathed in plants since I was born. So I'll take some hort classes, see how it goes, see how I can change my mind and what I can do next. Took classes. I was good at them because I had lots of experience.
Yeah.
And
you're probably teaching the professors some things.
So I took it and I was good at it and I enjoyed it, and I was able to say, all right, well, of course you don't necessarily have to be a laborer to be in horticulture. You can, continue through and get deep into the science. And so that's what really excited me was that potential. So got a degree in hort, did some studies abroad. So I really got interested in international agriculture.
Okay.
Where? I studied in Moscow, Russia for a semester.
Oh shit.
And in Aberdeen, Scotland for a semester.
And how was that?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was absolutely life-changing. I mean, if I got to choose what students did, they would be forced to go abroad for at least a semester, just because, coming from a small town in South Carolina and then going to school 30 minutes down the road, of course there's international people at the school, but you don't always cross those paths and get to experience their culture. But when you are put into a place where you are the minority and, you don't even know the language, in the case of Russia, it helps you find the real you. It shows you that, the little world you grew up in isn't it. And so it changed me a lot.
So you were doing horticulture internships in Russia and Scotland?
Yeah, well, I was taking classes.
You were taking class. So what was that like? I mean, were you learning different things? Are they growing different crops? Like,
Yeah, so Scotland was first, and that
Okay.
was as a junior. And there I actually took forestry. It was a cool thing because we had a situation where I could take classes there, and they were the same price as if I were to take classes at Clemson.
nice.
And so, there really wasn't a huge difference, and all of the courses counted for something for my degree.
Okay.
And so what they had available at the time, they didn't have greenhouse courses and things like that, but they had forestry and different ag. So I took a general ag class, I took forestry, and I took geography. Geography, which was super cool.
Nice.
So no, that was amazing. It wasn't extremely relevant to, controlled ag, but just the experience of being international and see how other people grow crops or breed pigs, and it was great. And I didn't plan on going abroad again because once I got back from Scotland, I had 2 semesters left till I graduated.
Okay.
And at the time I was ready to graduate, which once I went back to grad school, I didn't ever want to graduate. I didn't ever want to leave school. I loved it.
It's hard for us to get out of that ivory tower, but it's good too. That
Yes,
we do.
absolutely. But they had created a new international program with an agroengineering school in Moscow.
Oh, cool.
And so, the professors knew I went abroad and that I loved it, and so they were like, "Hey, you wanna go to Russia?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm graduating," and and they're like, "Well, what if we pay for your plane ticket?" I'm like, "Okay, keep talking." All right. Well, what if we pay for your room and board? Sounding better. Well, what if we can make sure that your classes count to get you everything you need to graduate? And I said, sold. And so
That was a hard negotiation, Allison.
So I said, all right, well, I guess I got a couple of months. I can get ready and pack up and move to Russia.
Wow.
So I did, and that was also a phenomenal experience.
What classes did you take there?
So the first 2 months were intensive Russian language.
Oh, really?
Yes, because
You can speak some Russian?
I mean, a little bit. This has been 10 plus years since I've been.
Okay, all right,
so
fair enough,
don't
fair enough.
quiz me here, but
I wouldn't know anyway.
I definitely had walking around skills.
Okay. You
But-
can ask where the bathroom is.
Yes,
Right? Yeah.
exactly, and beer and
That's important.
food.
Vodka.
Yeah. So no, it was amazing. I mean, because think about it, their alphabet's different.
Yeah.
So you can't just kind of squeeze it out like you could with Spanish. You know, we've all
right.
got a little experience in Spanish, but anyways, first 2 months were intensive language courses, and then it was agricultural courses, but they were taught by English speaking professors, and so they were in English. But the cool part was they would bring in students from their ag programs that could speak English, and so we would study together.
Oh,
And then
nice.
we'd go on lots and lots of field trips all around Moscow. So that
Wow.
experience, even though I loved both, that one was, I guess, the most real, because I would on the weekends go with some of the girls in the class to like their outskirt cities where they grew up, and I mean it was so bizarre. Like there was one person I went home with, Irina. And they like had a little parade for me because nobody there had seen an American person before. It was so cool.
Wow.
And like they went out and bought like the most expensive caviar that they could to, because it was an event. It was a big event. Nobody from America had been to their community before. And so that was just so special and so fun. And, with all the bad hype on Russia right now, it really stinks because the people themselves are amazing.
Of course. Of course.
And just so generous, and so it's a shame. But yes, that was amazing. So
Wow.
that was my undergrad. I flew back, and then a week later I walked and graduated.
Nice.
So that was amazing.
So that was for your undergrad?
Yes.
Okay. So Then you decided to stay on for grad school?
No. So I told you I was super interested in international ag. Like I loved agriculture, but I was also ready to go somewhere else.
Well, that's the beauty of agriculture. It is so international. Everyone needs to farm.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is what I love about agriculture. I mean, when I go to agriculture conferences like ASABE, I'm just like, oh my God, there's going to be a session on irrigation. There's going to be a session on evapotranspiration. There's going to be a session on pollination. And then I realize I'm like, oh yeah, I'm at an agriculture conference. Like it gets me so excited. But it's like the most diverse conference, right? Because everyone from around the world is learning how to grow food better.
Exactly.
With the resources that they have for their population. I mean, I love agriculture.
Yeah, exactly. So, I actually went to Penn State for a year.
Did I know this?
I don't know.
When were you there? Probably way after I was there.
2007.
Okay. I graduated in 2002.
Okay.
So we missed each other by 5 years.
Yeah. So I went there because the Russian program was a deal through Clemson and Penn State. So I met Penn State professors when I was in...
Roy Young was the department chair when I was there, and he came from Clemson. Did you know Roy Young? Oh, I'm sorry, for the ag engineering program. I should be specific.
Okay.
Yeah. No, there was totally a connection between Penn State and Clemson.
And so they formed this connection with Moscow Agro-Engineering University. And so it was a lot of the Penn State professors who was teaching us all. And so I got a fellowship to go to Penn State and study, but it was for ag ed.
Okay.
And so, though Penn State itself is fantastic, a great university, you know, the science in me was trying to claw its way out. And so, you know, being at ag ed, it's a lot of teaching you how to teach. And so I took my credits with me and I went back home because I wasn't happy with the direction that things were going. I just wasn't certain. And so I didn't want to waste my time or their time, you know. So I came back home. I worked at a bar.
Nice.
For, I don't know, probably 6 months. And then I reached back out to Dr. Faust, who I took some classes with as an undergrad, and was like, I want to get back in the greenhouse. I don't know what I want to do, but do you need a tech? You know, do you need help with something? And so I worked with him for a summer. And it was amazing. And it was with poinsettias and geraniums and, you know, floriculture crops. But it was controlled ag. It was amazing. And so he asked me to stay on to do a direct doctorate because I did not get my master's from Penn State. Those classes counted for my doctorate, but
good for you.
Yeah, so
skip a step.
Did that. And yeah, after that summer of just doing research in the greenhouses, I was like, all right, well, this is where I'm supposed to be. I guess I'll just travel and be international and maybe work that part out someday, but...
That's awesome. Well, this is sort of a lie. I'm going to say the first greenhouse that I worked in was at Penn State. The reason I say it's a lie is because the first greenhouse I worked in was as an undergrad at Davis, but we were growing mushrooms. So I kind of feel like that doesn't count because you wouldn't normally use a greenhouse to grow mushrooms.
Yeah.
It was really hard. But the first non-mushroom crop that I grew in a greenhouse was at Penn State growing poinsettias and how I learned about short day plants and light deprivation.
Exactly.
Cannabis
so
isn't
relevant.
the only plant that uses light dep.
So yeah, it's interesting looking back because it, you know, from there to now, it was actually building me up pretty well to be in the, you know, position in the industry I'm today. Yes, it was floriculture crops, but yes, it's short day plants. It's understanding, you know, getting to go around to different poinsettia facilities and watching them turn on, you know, daylight extension lighting and things like that right now I'm able to, you know, use and just convert that to cannabis. It's been I don't know. I feel like the training was in the stars to put me kind of where I am today.
So, okay, so you got your PhD from Clemson. What was your degree in, by the way?
Plant environmental science.
Okay. So then what? I mean, how did you stumble upon, or did you seek out cannabis?
Well, so let's think.
Because, I mean, you're in South Carolina.
Right.
And this is what year did you graduate? Like 2010 or something, maybe?
14.
Oh, geez, okay. So it wasn't legal, obviously.
Oh, no. No.
I don't even know if it is now.
It is hemp, it
right?
wasn't legal. Yeah. Now we have hemp, but there's no medical, there's nothing. And not even in connecting states. I mean, I think the closest is Virginia, maybe? Or Florida.
Not Florida?
Florida's, I don't know.
But Florida's weird, so they don't count.
Yeah, Florida's Florida.
I mean, you moved to California.
Yes.
You went all the way to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
were you just trying to get out of Dodge?
That's what it keeps sounding like, isn't it? So, I guess I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and in grad school and all my free time I had, right?
Yeah.
I came up with this program it was more like a kit to sell to growers who wanted to rear their own nematodes.
Okay.
Right, this is all
I'm going to follow.
Random.
Yeah.
So,
nematodes for good.
For good.
Okay.
Good. Yes. Beneficial nematodes. That we use for fungus gnat larvae or shortfly larvae, whatever.
Okay.
And so on. Because right now when you buy nematodes, they're usually dried and in like a long-term kind of situation. They were grown in broth and blah, blah, blah. Well, in my case, I was actually bringing in mealworms, and so I was reproducing in the mealworm. Okay. I'm sorry, waxworm. Reproducing inside the waxworm. And so, 2 nematodes go in, 100,000 come out.
So
within
the
2
nematodes
weeks.
are parasitizing
Yes.
the waxworm.
Yes.
Lucky waxworm.
Yes. So, anyways, it was a kit, and I was selling this to growers. Wow. It was going well, but then science turns into sales, right? After it's figured out.
Yeah,
so I was starting to get a little rough around the edges from that. But I started getting, because I also did consulting for IPM. And so I started getting a couple of inquiries about consulting for cannabis companies. And like you say, being from South Carolina, so I'm like, I don't know about this. I appreciate the plant and, wish we had it here, but it wasn't like a known career goal, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyways, took a few consulting jobs and loved it, fell in love with everything from, it just being a plant that needs so much research and help on the, commercial production side. Seeing the stories of these growers that are telling me how much has helped certain people do certain things. So just all of it, I just kind of fell in love with. And then got an offer for a job in San Diego. So I said, all right, well, nothing's holding me back. So I moved to San Diego. And so I stayed there about 3.5-ish years. And that was for a vertically integrated medical marijuana company.
Okay, so now you're on the West Coast. West Coast, best coast. I'm just going to say that. I am from the West Coast, so I'm a little biased. Did you have to get over a bias against cannabis yourself? Did you have any personal, familial biases? Did you have to come out to your family? We were just talking about...
I did have to come out to my family.
Yeah, that you were doing cannabis.
I was terrified. I was.
Did you sit them around the dinner table?
I did.
Really?
With my mom, I sat around the dinner table and I told her. And she was like, she's big on safety. So she was like, is it safe? Is this a legit company? This isn't just like mafia underground, like you're going to get took to Mexico to,
It is San Diego.
It is San Diego. They have a legal license. It's a plant. And I explained the excitement of the plant science. And, even though she had never used it and can't have appreciation from that point of view, I don't know. She got it very quickly. She understood. And it being a legit company, made her feel better. But yeah, I definitely did. I came out. I didn't know how they would react with that.
Did she tell your dad, or did you tell your dad?
Dad's just kind of like a nod, and
Okay.
like if mom says okay, just kind of nod and like, yep. So that was not a worry.
Okay.
But no, it was interesting because that was 2000, early 16, and I'm telling Dr. Faust, who I did my PhD under, like what I'm planning on doing.
What did he think?
He's like raising his eyebrow, like And then other people, I was in school with, they're going off and becoming professors at different places. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm going to California to grow weed.
Come on, girl. We'll accept you with open arms.
So I definitely, I don't know. Nobody was at least mean to my face, telling me I'm making a stupid career move. But there's definitely like, oh, you really need to think about this. How's it going to affect you if you ever want to come back to floriculture? Da, da, da. I was like, I don't care. Like, if it makes that big a difference, then it's in the place for me. So
yeah. I mean, I just have so many questions like that we could go with this move. One is about the plant itself, and like, what did you learn about the plant that was so similar or different from all the other plants that you had handled? That's that question. And the second question is, you also had most of your experience in greenhouses, and now you're going indoors. Mm-hmm. And what was that learning curve like? I mean, did you walk in and just be horrified, or like pleasantly surprised, or maybe a combination of both?
It was both. Because we had a few different facilities. One was indoor and it was brand new. And it was like, whoa, this is so awesome. Everything's white walled and clean, when I'm used to being in a greenhouse with gravel floors and rusty fans. And so on one hand it was crazy cool, but then we went up to see the other facility that was on a reservation, and it was in like a mobile trailer, and it was pretty sketchy. So I don't know, I guess I wasn't afraid of the differences. To me, you've got these certain things the plant needs, and you just fulfill them in one way or the other.
Were there, I mean, you came from South Carolina. First, there's like 7,000 questions in my head. Of course there are. But like, South Carolina I think of as hot and humid. Yeah. Am I right in characterizing that?
Oh, yeah.
And you're growing in a greenhouse in a hot and humid climate. Mm-hmm. And then you go to indoor in a really mild climate of San Diego, right? I mean, did you walk into the indoor facility and be like, oh my God, if we were like, growing our plants in an indoor in South Carolina, it'd be so much easier? Or were you maybe the other side, you're like, God, we're in San Diego, why are we growing indoors? It would be so easy to grow in a greenhouse.
Both.
Okay.
Both of those, absolutely. No, I walk in and it's like, heaven on earth, because you just press a dial to reach the set points you want versus, battling an old greenhouse to, have enough airflow to kind of get you down to acceptable temperatures, because it's an older greenhouse. And you're growing a crop that, you get pennies per square foot, and you can't afford to upgrade things. And so, yeah, I was placed into, what comparatively was, you're growing in space. Everything's perfect.
I don't know why I knew you were going to say that.
Completely controlled and just, perfection. Mm-hmm. Which, later you find out it is not necessarily perfection, but comparatively.
Right. I mean, just to stick with that greenhouse environment in South Carolina, you mentioned airflow. Is that the primary strategy that you could use to battle or compensate, maybe is the better word for the high humidity?
Pad and fan cooling.
Yeah.
It doesn't help with the humidity.
Right. Could you at least squeeze a couple of degrees out of that?
Barely. Okay. I mean, you're running air through a water wall.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, and those, of course, there are really high-tech greenhouses in the Southeast. Not going to say that, but the majority are not. And if you're able to just lower the temperature a little, you're happy.
Would you pull shade screens just
to
reduce the heat gain and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, absolutely. There are other little tips and tricks we can do, but the control is nowhere near what you can get on indoor.
Is it impossible? I mean, is it impossible to grow cannabis in the South in a greenhouse? Would you ever try to do that?
In my own greenhouses?
Yeah, I mean, no.
I would not.
You cannot be faint at heart, I'm assuming, to attempt that.
No. And the problem is the humidity. On nicer, newer greenhouses, if you pick the right time of year, you can.
Okay.
You can get maybe 1 or 2 cycles, but...
not for year-round production?
No. Not in just hoop houses. No.
So what's different... I'm jumping all over the place, but what's different about growing hemp in a field in South Carolina? Why not grow that in a greenhouse, or could you grow THC cannabis in a field in South Carolina? Like, I'm just trying to understand why you would say no to a greenhouse to grow cannabis, but yes to grow hemp in a field.
Yeah, At first glance, it doesn't make sense, does it? Because you're putting it outside where it's higher light, not necessarily higher temperatures, because the greenhouse is always a bit hotter than
the greenhouse effect is a thing.
Yeah. I really feel a lot of the UV is stopping botrytis. Not stopping, but lowering the botrytis pressure. For sure.
It makes sense. I mean, people are touting the benefits of using UV to kill molds and kill bacteria and things in the water and the air. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. You've got nature's airflow, pushing the humidity around. In the greenhouse, it's harder. Again, we're going back to hoop houses that are older. Getting proper homogeneous airflow is harder in the greenhouses. You got your little hot spots, but outdoors, it comes together. Of course, there's low spots you could plant in that would be bad, but in general, it's easier in that respect.
That's so interesting. I love that you brought up UV, because I'm thinking, I bet a lot of people don't realize, especially like polyethylene and plastic glazing have UV inhibitors to allow that plastic to last longer, and so you're blocking that UV. That's one of the big downsides of using plastic for even tomatoes, right? Because it could be affecting the navigation of bees to pollinate the flowers.
Exactly. And it's interesting because we certainly have attempted to flower indoors.
You have?
I'm sorry, flower in these greenhouses.
Okay.
In these specific greenhouses. And, I mean, again, there's no dehumidification. And so, if we're doing a fall or early spring where we can get away with not running water on the wet walls, where it's just bringing, cooler air inside, still, I mean, botrytis will just, it's rough. It's rough. And, it's interesting because it'll grow on the whole bud, inside and out. You could look at it and see it. Not every single bud, but, the general growth is, you could just say it's everywhere.
Okay.
Where outdoors, when I'm breeding and selecting, I select plants that are not, I'm not holding my arm up and bragging that it's the size, 3 size, the cola is 3 size my arm, because, you're going to have higher botrytis potential in those bigger buds.
True.
But if you do get botrytis, it's usually inside of the bud. So I call them grenades, because it'll look amazing, but then you pop the bud open and it's just like
gray
filled
inside
with gray. And so is that the effect from, the sun on the outer sides of that?
It's irradiating the outside. That's interesting.
So we definitely select for smaller bud size.
It's interesting because breeding, traditionally in agriculture for like the last 10,000 years has been about yield and disease resistance. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're doing the same thing, disease resistance. And yield doesn't necessarily have to be bigger buds. It can be more smaller bud sites.
Yeah. Medium-sized buds. Because if you go for the big buds, you're not going to have any because they're all diseased. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, when people, for the last 4 years, when people ask, what are my breeding goals? Number one is disease resistance. Because I don't care if you have 50% CBD, if it won't grow at all, what good is it?
What's the point?
So, disease resistance is huge because the pressure in the southeast is, it's like nothing we've seen. And so, if you think back of like year one of growing hemp, well, we have no option but to go and source genetics from places that are already growing. Yeah. All right, you got Oregon and Colorado. Well, their pressure and environment is way different.
Totally different.
Way different. Not to even mention their, the latitude, which affects photoperiod.
That's right.
Whole nother story. But we would bring plants, and it's just straight night and day how it wasn't necessarily needed in those places to select for disease pressure, because you would have plants right beside each other, side by side, same soil, same environment, and some would just look like you set them on fire because of that's the way the fungus shows itself, basically, is it eats the plant from bottom up. And so because it turns everything so brown and it looks like a burning bush. But one would just be completely consumed, and then the one beside it would be totally fine, and that's just the natural resistance.
Wow.
Yeah, and so people ask, well, do you purposefully inoculate to be able to select? No, like I don't need to. Like that inoculum is there. It is there.
Wow. Okay, so you're in San Diego. I'm gonna go backwards. You're in San Diego. You're in this indoor facility, and on the surface, or in reality, you're able to control a lot more variables, right? And like photoperiod being one of them, right. Humidity being another one. What were some of the challenges maybe you didn't expect being in an indoor facility that should be, is that controlled environment that everybody talks about? Was it really controlled? And I don't mean to pick on them specifically. I just mean indoor in general.
Yeah, no, there were certainly improvements that could happen. So this is prior to upgrading to be double stack LEDs, right?
That's right.
So if we're just talking HPS lighting, it was good enough. There are always things that can be tweaked to be better or faster or whatnot, but it was good enough. But the problem I encountered was, what were the goals, and what were the goals based off of? I'm used to being in floriculture where I can read a paper, ask an extension agent or a professor or somebody that's been growing for 20 years, at least on a scale.
Yeah.
What are my set points? What do I want to achieve with this beast that I can make achieve these goals? We didn't know what our goals were to begin with.
Wow.
And so, when I joined the company, they already had growers there, with a lot of them being like legacy growers. And, even within them, there are fights of, well, if you don't have it exactly 75 degrees when you're changing to flower, they're all going to die. And so it's just all these opinions of what should set points be, what should your light intensity be, how much CO2. And so it was frustrating that I didn't have hard numbers to work from, because the equipment itself, yeah, sure, it's working good enough, but what are we going for? So that's kind of where we led into working with Fluence, and you got to start with something. So let's start with light intensity.
Okay, how did that relationship start? Because it's so funny you say, when I first got there, it was high pressure soda, because I don't think of that facility is being I think of you and LEDs, right? And like that relationship you created with Fluence, it was young, it was early in their, right? Like, company. It was new, certainly, to the industry. Like, how did you find each other? What made you even think I want to try LEDs? I mean, you're really like one of the first people to try it.
Yeah.
Thank you. You led this industry.
No, and it was not easy. It wasn't just let's do this and everybody's gung ho. No, it was my growers telling me I'm going to ruin everything because you can't flower under LEDs.
Period.
In no circumstance could you flower under LEDs. And I'm thinking, well, I don't have an emotional battle in this fight. Like, why not try it? So we did.
How did you convince the company to invest?
Well, it didn't start out as a major investment, right? I had to show why we wanted to do research and how it could equate to blah blah blah. So actually, Fluence found me, and it was from Josh Garavac, who was working there at the time. We had met each other at conferences while we were both in grad school.
Okay.
And so he had heard I crossed over to the cannabis industry, and so he found me because they were looking for commercial partners to do experiments with. And he was like, "All right, well, she's at training, she can do this." And so it didn't start. It wasn't just an immediately switch to LED lights. Go double stack. We spent a long time where on our single level racks we were bringing in their lights. Even at experimental versions where we could get really really high PPFD. Oh wow! So comparing HPS to 600, 700, 1500 PPFD. And just proving, well, one, yes, you can flower, and two, higher intensity equates to higher yields. So we proved that
1% more light equals 1% more yield.
Yes. So proving the men above was basically, we're not gonna mess with any of the commercial space. We'll still run every section. It's just some it's going to have different lights, and we're not gonna kill anything while we're at it.
So it was truly an R&D area. You weren't growing this to actually commercially sell it necessarily. I mean,
we did it in our commercial footprint area.
Okay.
But in the trial, the high range was 1500, which maybe in this one 4x4 section we might get a little burn and we have to extract it.
Okay.
But it's not going to just kill a group because every square foot is valuable. So being that it was an experiment where you're just killing plants, it was acceptable in the thoughts that, well, we can increase yields, increase efficiencies. It made sense. And they were great about letting me do my projects. So, I know not every company is that way, sometimes for good reason. So we proved it. We proved it with this highlight. We can do it. But you're only going to get this highlight with LEDs. You can't get, 1200, 1500 PPFD with an HPS light. I mean,
Why?
You could, but it's going to be, a foot above the plants. At least at that time. That's what our lights could achieve.
Interesting.
I don't know. I've not dealt with indoor lights in 4 years or so, so I don't know what happened with technology, but at least at that time, you're looking at 700-800 with an HPS light. So we proved that, and then in the county we were in, even though we had a giant warehouse we had planned to expand in, the county put up some regulations saying we couldn't expand into that warehouse area. So, we're stuck with these 4 rooms, and that's it. So we can't get any more square footage, even though it was the same property. It was wild. It didn't make sense. But they didn't say we couldn't go vertical within the same square footage. So that's when, on the business side, it really started to make sense, proving these lights, proving it could work, because we can't expand horizontally, but we can go vertical. And the only way you can go vertical with the height we had was with LEDs. So the one project led to converting one room into double stack rolling benches. And so that was, God, it feels like 20 years ago, but also last year at the same time.
I know. Well, I mean, this industry has advanced so quickly, and you pioneered through these studies and partnerships and the backing of the company a lot of the strategies that growers are doing now, right? I mean, turning something that was so cutting edge and people were saying wasn't even possible to now being accepted by a lot of growers, even if not at every stage, at least at some stage of the growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we were the guinea pig we worked with Pip.
Yeah. Oh,
and so I think we were like their second installation.
Wow.
Or something like that. And yeah, I mean, just drainage at that point was mind blowing. You know, how are we going to drain the top level and do it without just water being all, just basically doing it without raising the humidity in the room.
Yeah.
So all of that, we were really the guinea pigs with, which I enjoyed every minute of it because, we were doing something new and creative and ultimately making the business better. But, there were some rough times too. I mean, that's when we got you involved. Like, oh crap, our humidity's way too high.
Okay, so now we just doubled our square footage and we have the same HVAC that we had with a single level.
Exactly.
What do we do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even before that, in those levels, how are you going to move air? You've got to move air. You can't just hang these variable speed, the traditional fans on the walls because, I mean, you've basically got little compartments everywhere in the grow. And so we retrofitted some cloth duck socks, and then, I mean, there's so many iterations we went through. But yeah, I mean, and then convincing, all right, well, we just high five, we just doubled our square footage, our plants, but now we need more dehumidification. So, yeah, there was definitely good and bad times during that project.
Yeah.
But,
do you feel like you ever cracked that nut in terms of airflow and dehumidification before you left?
Yeah, we definitely got more dehu units.
Yeah.
And that fixed that. But I think, I mean, even talking to Pip today, we still don't know exactly what we're doing. And then I'm not saying them, I'm saying our industry. We talk about airflow. Well, we're just comparing to lettuce and tomatoes and things that, are similar, yet very different than cannabis.
Yeah.
And so, thinking mechanically, yes, we can make things do what we say they're doing according to lettuce.
Right.
But this isn't lettuce. So, one big thing Pip's wanting to do is start bringing in science.
Yeah.
Saying, all right, well, we can hit these metrics, but are those metrics right? Let's put the sources, the dollars into research to prove this is actually what cannabis wants, and then meet those goals. So,
just like you started with, what are the goals for those temperature targets and light targets? Yeah.
Yeah, you got to know your goal.
So, I mean, I think you and I met at this rando conference in San Francisco in like the basement of some hotel. I don't even remember. And I think, I don't even remember what we were up there to talk about, but you and I were on a panel together. Somehow we were sitting up on the stage together.
Yeah.
And people were discounting two things. One, that greenhouses could produce quality cannabis.
Right.
You just talked about whether LED lights could. Now we're talking about greenhouses, like the most basic horticulture technology. And the people in the audience, and this is probably like 2017. I mean, this was still early in the industry. Just talking about how cannabis was this magical plant, and you couldn't apply what we'd learned in horticulture from other crops that we'd been growing for decades. I was like, no, cannabis needs something special. And yes, I agree, cannabis needs something special. But you even mentioned, just in this discussion, that you didn't have any resources, right? Like there was no cooperative extension. I mean, the closest thing we have to cooperative extension, almost still to this day, is the hydro store down the street, right? And hopefully they're knowledgeable about whatever it is that you're growing. And I just remember us both sitting there looking at each other like, what do you mean greenhouses can't be used to grow cannabis? Like, you and I were just sitting there, like, fuming. And I remember, I don't even think that's why we were up on the stage together, but I think we both decided together, we have to address this comment. Like, we have to address this myth. Like, this... And actually, from that conference, I created a table where it's, like, greenhouse and indoor and the pros and cons of each. Because I was like, we got to lay this out for people. I mean... one isn't necessarily automatically better than the other. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. And it goes back to your original question. What is the goal?
Yep.
What is the goal? What is your season? What is your location? What kind of greenhouse do you have? What kind of technology do you have in your indoor facility? I mean...
what are you growing for?
Yeah. Who's your market? Is it for extraction and terpenes, or is it for top shelf flower?
Yep.
All of those questions matter, but to just say, no, this technology can't be used, LED lights can't be used, greenhouses can't be used, I don't know, living soil can't be used, I don't even know, all the different myths that are out there, that's what they are. Yeah. And just because you don't know how to use that technology doesn't mean it can't be used.
Right.
Successfully.
Yes.
Yeah. So... the other thing that I wanted to say is that it's really incredible that not just you, because I know you come from a place of science, come from a place of research, from the love of plants, to publicize your findings. I mean, that's bold, right? I mean, good or bad. I mean, when I say good or bad, results are good or bad, negative or positive. I mean, whatever you want to say. All results are good, in my opinion.
Yes.
But how did you have to convince your company to let you talk about what you found? Were they like, oh, you're going to give away our edge? How did you do that?
The way I look at it is there's a number of things. One, if you continue down the road, whether you're a researcher or whether you're in commercial production, as long as you keep doing what you're doing as far as learning, growing, learning new things, then people are going to keep learning from you, but they're still following you. True. So, you're learning new things to increase your efficiency, your yield. Every day, you share to the industry grows in general, and it's good for everybody. Now, obviously, I have my own business now, and I realize there are some things you should keep close to yourself. Maybe something you can commercialize, or I'm trying to think of an example. I don't even know. There's like, if you find something you can patent, sure, maybe that's something you keep close to your chest because you can commercialize it. But if we're just talking, well, how much light does a plant need, or what's the DLI that you should apply to certain varieties? I mean, those things to me are worth sharing. They're worth, being able to be put out there where you can have a conversation with others and see what they've been seeing with their varieties or in their climate, and then you learn from each other. Too many companies in the cannabis industry keep things too close to their chest. It's not good for the industry in general. And in the industry I come from, floriculture, we had these societies where the growers and the researchers get together and they talk, and the companies tell the researchers what they need, and so they provide that input, and so it's just this sharing that everybody grows and learns with. And of course, like I said, there's that 5%, 1% of things you might learn along the way that it might be commercialized that you don't want to share, but the majority of things, and especially in this industry where we're learning silly elementary things if we compare to like tomatoes.
Yeah.
That
just the basic fundamentals.
Yes, we should be sharing and talking about that.
Yeah.
We absolutely should.
Well, and I also wonder, like, is there a disadvantage to those grower operators that aren't sharing? Because I just feel like if they share and then somebody else had something similar or different that happened to them based off these similar parameters, you have that conversation, and the grower who thought that they had some secret edge by sharing it realized, oh, I can do even better.
Yes.
Because I shared and had this conversation and learned something from them. As like there's give and take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you bring up an idea, they say, well, in my experience, this happened, and you can just it's give and take. You learn from each other.
I mean, it's so interesting that you brought up like the floriculture and like these. There's these trade associations, right, for everything, for floriculture, for almonds. I mean, we're in California, and there's like the California Almond Board, and they're funding research. They're telling, right, like the universities, here's the problems we're having. Help us solve these problems. Oh, and by the way, it's also okay if you publish, because I know that's one of the big challenges. Not just cannabis. Cannabis has its own sort of like federal government sort of challenges, first off, with research. But even with like vertical farming, there's a lot of these companies who want the universities to sign NDAs and not publish the research that these poor grad students, and the professors are trying to get tenure for, the grad students are trying to, like get their degree for, and they're really like binding up the industry. And I just feel like, God, the more that we could share, like, you don't have to share everything. Right? Like you just said, don't tell me the trade secrets. I mean, I remember one of the very first conversations I had with a vertical farm company. They're like, well, we want you to sign this NDA and blah, blah, blah. And I'm doing like climate management. And they're like, because, like it was like our fertilizer recipe. And I was like, why would you be even telling me your fertilizer recipe? I'm dealing with the air, right? Like, I don't need to know that. Like, this is an as need to know basis.
Right.
I just, just like so closed off from each other. And even if we just shared the mistakes or the things that didn't go well, then everybody else isn't going to go down that wrong path. At least it just kind of steers the industry in towards the right direction. And nobody has figured out exactly what the right direction is yet, I don't think. Maybe they have for their certain strains or their certain climate or whatever, but there's still so much to learn.
So much.
Yeah. So, so you had these partnerships, this research you did with Fluence and PIP, and you published it, and then you left San Diego.
I did.
Why?
Oh, there are lots of reasons, but we'll call the main reason. I guess about halfway through, South Carolina decided to legalize hemp, and now getting a hemp permit is nothing. I mean, in South Carolina, as long as you can pass a background check, you can have a permit. So it's not a big deal. But at the time, there were 20 farmers that got a license, and you could grow 20 acres. It was a big deal. And so my mom got one of the licenses. So
she was clearly a convert at this point.
Oh yeah, no, she was like, how do I get in on it? Yeah, she got one of the licenses, and so I spent about a year bouncing back and forth. But actually decided to partner with the marijuana company I was with to build an extraction facility. So we built an extraction facility because there was no one there to extract at that time. And so I moved back to kind of get that on its feet, get it moving. I had all intentions of coming back to California.
You did?
I did.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I loved California. But, also home and family.
Yeah.
But got
home and family.
Home and family. So I bounced back and forth for a long time, but then I went there full time to run that facility. But then at the end of the day, like, I don't want to run an extraction facility the rest of my life. Like, I love plants and the growing part. So that was moving along. But then got involved, kind of took the family farm, which was growing hemp, to the next level, and we started doing our own product manufacturing. And at that time it was just a nightmare of bringing in plants from like Colorado and Oregon, and they flower when they're 3 inches tall, or they can't handle
that's a thing.
Photo period. Yes. Problems. Yeah. And you're paying $10 per liner and it's flowering at 3 inches.
Oh my God.
So, I saw very quickly, well, we need to be selecting and breeding for varieties that are conducive to the southern environment. So that was, between going vertical with our family and then, being on this mission to find plants that would grow well in the southeast, I just kind of decided to stay and do that, and that's basically what I've been doing ever since.
Okay, so what is the hemp mine?
So we breed, we grow, we sell young plants, and so young plants being unrooted cuttings or rooted cuttings, clones.
Oh, okay, both.
Ship them all across the U.S.
You can, because it's federally legal, so we don't have any interstate commerce laws.
Right. So, but, for me to understand these plants, I have to trial them sufficiently. You have to see, well, how do they respond to photo period? How do they respond to disease? How do they respond to, you got to look at their terpene profile. You got to look at their potency. You can't go over 0.3% or you're going to get your crop burned down. So all of these little things, I had to wrap up to find, the perfect plants for us. And so that was the original goal, is for us to grow, find these plants. But, year after year, when I see, my neighbor down the road being sold seed from California, because that's where the weed is and that's where people know cannabis, well, somehow I guess that means they also know hemp. And so, they get hemp seed sent. Well, it actually does end up being marijuana, and so their field's burnt down.
Are you serious?
And so it's just this nightmare for farmers all across the southeast. So then, coming from indoor environment where I'm used to, poinsettias, cuttings, I know how to ship them across the nation. So we became a genetics company.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest portion. So is your
primary market then the southeast corridor, because those are the plants you're breeding for you? Like, it just makes sense to kind of start there?
For the most part. But we do a lot of business in the northeast, oddly enough.
Well, it's still humid.
Yeah,
there.
Still humid.
Okay.
The northeast is a great place to grow outdoor hemp and
why
cannabis. Well, it gets cold enough where it kills the caterpillars in the it kills off the caterpillars in the winter, because that's our worst pest, is caterpillars.
Interesting.
I mean, they just eat up the bud, poop in it.
But then they turn into beautiful butterflies.
No, they're nasty little moths.
And you don't want them to pollinate your cannabis either.
God, and there's nothing you can spray to control them. I mean, it's bad.
Wow.
But, so they have that going for them.
Okay.
And they have the cooler temperatures in the fall. So when you harvest, it's not so nasty on the plants. Yeah.
Okay. You said that fields will get burned down. I'm assuming you mean literally burned.
Yeah, literally.
So, I mean, is there like some federal agent going out there and like picking a bud off the plant and testing it to see if it has more than 0.3% THC?
It's a state agent, yeah.
Really?
Yes.
They'll just like do a random test?
No, oh God, this is a whole box of worms, but so
or caterpillars.
Yeah, freaking caterpillars. So in South Carolina, some states are different. We have to call out our Department of Ag hemp tester, and we ask for them to test 30 days prior to harvest. Okay, so 30 days prior to harvest, we have to be under 0.3. what do you think happens in 30 days?
A lot.
Yeah, who do you think doesn't care that you're hot after 30 days? The state. It's like a known kind of middle terrible purgatory section we're put in because of these regulations don't make sense. You know,
are you active there?
Yeah.
With the hemp industry? I mean, I know before you left California, you were really active on like the hemp board or something, right, in the state.
Yeah.
Are you doing similar stuff in South Carolina?
Yeah, we don't have a state hemp board.
Okay.
It's the Farm Bureau that is like the advisors.
Oh,
to the
nice.
state.
So you actually work with your county farm bureau or state farm bureau? I love hearing that.
Yep.
Cool.
So that's our path, but it's hard to change anything there. I mean, we really just sit around and complain to each other.
You know. Yeah. When you're testing a breed, a new genetics, making sure that they're, you know, not flowering too early or have the 0.3% or robust and resistant against the caterpillar or whatever the things are that you're breeding for specifically, how are you testing that? Are you testing, I mean, I think of breeding programs a lot of times, like they start in like a growth chamber and they move out into a greenhouse and then they put it out in the field.
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you do kind of a similar setup?
Yeah, exactly. What usually happens is I'll make a cross and I will first grow it indoors. And so that'll tell me, you know, are there going to be hermaphrodites?
Okay.
It'll also tell me how its photo period is, because I've got varieties that, you know, if it doesn't have over 18 hours of light, it'll flower.
18?
Wow. And so think about it. If you're outdoors anywhere in the U.S., you know, you're never over 18 hours. So you plant it outside, it ends up, you know,
unless you're like Alaska in the summer.
Yeah. So
whoa.
Being indoors helps me understand, well, you know, is this going to be what I have deemed a semi-automatic flower or photoperiodic?
Okay.
Because there are a lot of plants that, you know, will do good indoors, but then won't outdoors due to photoperiod, but also disease pressure, things like that. And so my goals have become producing smokable flower.
Okay.
And so it looks and smells like weed, and you would never know until you smoke it and you don't get high. But, you know, there are plants that I would certainly sell to indoor growers, and they produce smokable hemp flower. But outdoors, I know whether it's photoperiod, whether it's disease resistance or whatnot, you can't grow outdoors. So that first step kind of gives me a separation there.
Okay.
And then you put the plants outdoors, and you trial them in natural photoperiod. So planting in the spring, harvest in the fall. You know, you understand how they react to southern blight and fusarium and caterpillars and all of these metrics. But then there are those flowers that are the semi-autos that have to have 18 hours, but they produce incredible flower. But if you understand plant science and how to trick them, you put stadium lights up, you keep them vegetative as long as you want, you cut the lights out, and you round the flower. So that's actually this year has been our most popular varieties, is because even in greenhouses, you can put these plants inside and not have to use blackout cloth. Because no matter what, as long as you turn off their photoperiodic lighting, they're going to flower.
Nice.
So it's kind of cool.
Nice.
Because you don't have to have blackout, because with blackout comes humidity and people not forgetting to pull it, etc.
Yep.
So.
Does hemp have landrace strains like THC cannabis? Or has that just been all shot to hell from the 40s or the 30s? All destroyed and some seed bank was burned down. I don't know. I'm making up. I'm making things up, people. Yeah. By the way, I'm just conspiracy theorizing right now.
You know, I got one seed from this girl that told me her family was in the Mexican mafia, or I guess cartel, and that it was a hemp plant from Mexico. So I grew it. And it looks like what you would think of being landrace, but then at the same time, most seed varieties, like for like hemp hearts or that sort of thing, most of those look like landrace. You know what I mean by that?
What does a landrace strain look like? I didn't realize it had a different look.
Oh, it's tall and scraggly, and you know, it usually turns into hermaphrodites. And
interesting.
I don't know if any of us know what we're talking about with this. I mean, really, we can. There are people that will act like they do, but I don't know. I mean, in short, it means that you gathered it from the wild.
Yeah.
Right? But
like you're mushroom hunting in the Amazon or something, right?
Yes, but most people I know who have these land races got them from somebody that got them from someone.
Of course,
so
yeah.
Who really knows where it came from? So anyways, that plant, it was scraggly, and you know, total cannabinoids, it's under 1%.
Wow.
So I'm still holding on to it because maybe there are other things in it that we just haven't learned to test for yet that could be special, but I don't know. Who knows? I might just be wasting space.
Probably not, though.
We'll see.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so is there something that you've learned from growing hemp, I guess field-grown hemp, that you could apply to cannabis, to THC cannabis?
Yes, absolutely. So with hemp, and I'm sure you see this in marijuana, you know, people think bigger, better, more, you know, more equals more money. But, you know, I've seen with hemp, whether there's not labor to harvest it all, or there's not an extractor to process enough. You know, people make mistakes with just having the idea, grow a bunch, you're going to make a ton of money, instead of sitting down, making a business plan, understanding where is all this going to go. You know, if you're allowed to grow 10 acres of marijuana, what are you going to do with that? And even this year, I've talked to some growers in Michigan who are allowing ridiculous amounts of outdoor marijuana to be grown. You know, I'm talking last month, when, you know, they're going to be harvesting in a month or less right now.
Wow.
And I asked them, well, what are you going to do with all that? You know, that's a lot of HVAC if all that's going to be smokable flower. And they're like, well, I don't know. You know, we've got another person's going to figure that out. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, like I have seen so many people just blow hundreds of thousands of dollars, which in marijuana is, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
You know, going big, because yes, that could be a bunch of money. When ultimately all that happens is you end up, you know, let's say you've got 10 acres, you know, your manpower and your warehouse that you're going to dry in is only suitable for 2 acres, and the rest you've tended to all year. You've paid for those clones. You sprayed the pesticides, and it's going to have
paid for the labor
exactly,
to tend it,
and you're going to have to sit there and just let it rot, basically. So, you know, seeing the failures in hemp has really opened my eyes to all of this large scale growing that's being allowed to be done in marijuana, and understanding that a lot of creative ways is going to have to be implemented. So what I mean by that is we've been doing some research with a gas company, and they produce, you know, large scale liquid nitrogen freezing equipment for everything from, you know, fresh meat to be frozen to, I don't know, fruit. And that technology's out there. It's nothing new. It's been perfected. You know, of course, there's some tweaks that'll need to happen with cannabis, and that they have done. But, you know, being smart about things and saying, all right, well, I'm only going to allocate 30% of my best flower to be hung dried, you know, properly have moisture removed, and, you know, invest in that equipment to do that. Where the other 60%, you know, our team plans to do fresh frozen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what do you know? Think about an acre. you're probably going to have 2,000, 3,000 pounds per acre that you have to deal with.
Jeez.
And so, how are you going to freeze that much? I mean, literally, how are you going to freeze that much? And in hemp, learn from our failures. We have found you take one of those large Gaylord boxes and put 100 pounds of it in wet, and then put it in a conventional freezer, even if it's big enough in volume to fit in there. Yeah. Do you think it's gonna freeze that big of a mass? No. It actually ends up rotting inside. So you end up with another grenade, because the system's not strong enough to freeze it all.
Yeah.
And then, the parts where it's half frozen ends up, kind of mush, and it's just bad. So, understanding that there are technologies out there that can, do 10,000 pounds a day, you freeze it immediately, then you put it in your, traditional freezers. And then from there, you have time to think and divert, or this is going to go to fresh frozen, this is going to go to terpene production, et cetera, et cetera. Just learning to deal with mass has been definitely a lot of lessons learned being in hemp.
I mean, I always wonder why there is so much focus in this industry to produce more, especially in really mature markets, and California being like the perfect example for like THC cannabis, right? And just this race to the bottom. And we still talk to growers in California who are like, we need to produce more because the prices are lower, and so to make up for that loss, right, in revenue, we need to make more for the lower price point. And I often think, like, well, why are you looking at the other side of the equation, right? Because if you think about, and I think about in terms of efficiency, I am an engineer, and if I just thought about resource use efficiency just in general terms, right? Efficiency is how much you get out for how much you put in. Mm-hmm. And everyone is focused on the numerator. More and more, produce more and more and more for the same amount. What if instead we produce the same amount and use less? We already have a glut in the market. Yeah. Prices are already coming down. So why aren't we focused on the other side of that equation?
I agree.
I don't. I always the quote that always comes to my mind when like having this like part of a conversation is Jurassic Park, when Dr. Malcolm, right? That's his name. He says, scientists asked if we could. They didn't ask if we should create new, dinosaurs or whatever. And it's like, we're creating a dinosaur. It's like, can we produce 10 acres of hemp? Yes, you can. Should you?
No.
With available technology and resources and what happens post-harvest, like all the things downstream, right? I mean, do we even have the infrastructure to like make hemp the sustainable agricultural product that everyone touts to be, like fiber and feed and all these other amazing medicine, everything?
Not quite. I think it's coming. I know a few production facilities are open up, and that's a whole different world that I operate in. Because the hemp plants I work with is just a cannabinoid plant, right? It's just a cannabinoid plant. It looks, smells, and acts like marijuana, but it's grown for a different cannabinoid. And so on the other side of the road is fiber hemp and hemp grown for seed. And so and whether that's feed or to be pressed into oil or to be hemp parts. So those are very different types of hemp.
Of course they would have different properties that you're breeding for and selecting for. That makes perfect sense.
Yes, it's grown differently. Mine, we have clones. They're planted 6 foot apart. Whereas if I'm going for, everybody has their own terms, industrial hemp, they're grown like corn, where they're very close. You're probably not irrigating them. You just planted with a tractor. It's harvested with a tractor.
To hell with the flower.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what it's there for anyway.
Yeah. So very, very different. Although there are some people, I haven't seen it in person, but there are people that are growing tri-crops. And so what that's supposed to be is it has the fiber, so it's, very straight, like corn. Imagine it like corn or really like bamboo. But it does have floral parts.
Okay.
So it's very low potency, but a tractor could come through and take the tops off, extract the CBD from that, even have seed from that, and then you've got the fiber stem as fiber. So
interesting.
I don't know. I see mass CBD only being able to be sustainably done that way. And that's why I've chosen to do smokable flower, because there's always a craft market. There's always those people who want really, really, really high quality smokable flower, whether it's people that CBD really helps them, or whether it's people that used to smoke a lot of weed but they don't want to get high anymore, but they still want that feeling. So that's kind of why I've went down the route that I have.
Okay. Well, Allison, it's been really fun to talk to you. I have one more official question to ask you, then I have my rapid fire questions for you. Okay, first question what do plants crave?
Research.
Oh, I like that.
I bundled it all up into one word. They crave research, because they have their cravings, but we don't know what exactly they want yet.
So we got to help them. Love it. All right, so rapid fire questions. Okay. You ready? Okay, these are meant to just be like 1 or 2 sentence answers. If you want to expand on something, please go ahead. All right. Number 1, are plants introverts or extroverts?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think they're extroverts.
Yeah?
Yes. But I think it depends on the plant.
Okay.
Right? We've got male plants that will just sling their pollen everywhere and wants to be part of everybody's
business. As every male does.
and then we have some female plants, and some do not smell a lot, so you would never know they're there. But then you have the really boisterous women that, you can smell their terpenes from 2 miles away.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, 2 miles might be pushing it, but if the wind's blowing the right direction, maybe, yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. I like it. Extrovert. The male slinging their pollen everywhere. I mean, wow. We need to create a graphic for this episode just for that. Can hemp and cannabis create a more sustainable world?
Yes. I think eventually we will be there, but I think right now it's making a less sustainable world. I mean, just think about the packaging.
Oh,
I mean, if nothing else, think of all of the vape batteries, all of the bags inside the bag, with a glass bottle in the middle, to get us this world-saving plant. So I think the thoughts there, our path to get to that end goal, I think is going to be a little rough and opposite of where we want to go.
It is pretty frustrating to have all these glass containers and then not be able to. I mean, we stick them in our regular recycling, but like it just would make sense to me to like take it back to the dispensary where you got it from, and it could just be reused.
Yeah.
Why does it even need to be broken down and recreated into something?
Right.
Make
everybody use ball jars.
Yeah.
Right.
Keep
all
it
the
simple.
Same lids. Yeah.
Yeah.
And reuse it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, think about beer bottles and wine bottles. I mean, they all pretty much look the same. I mean, there's a few brands that might look different, or there's, wine bottles. They might have a different wine bottle if you're like a Merlot or a Chardonnay, but it's still a Chardonnay or a Merlot bottle. Mm-hmm. Like, you can even identify what that wine is based off of the bottle. Imagine if we could identify if it was like CBD or THC or something based off of the bottle it was. Okay, I just created like a super genius marketing idea. Somebody take it and run with it. What Southern cuisine would go best with cannabis?
Ooh. I mean, I immediately think a meat and three.
I don't know what that is. A meat and three?
Meat and three, yeah.
Okay, educate.
Right, so, if you are a meat eater, you get a meat. So usually it's not the most healthiest thing in the world, like a pork chop, chicken, all fried.
That's the best way.
With 3 vegetables.
And does potato count as a vegetable?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
As does corn, of course.
Fries is always an option.
Oh, yeah.
But,
and a dessert, you said?
yes.
Okay.
So I would say smoking prior to a large meat and 3 meal, smoking after it, and then having a dessert, which maybe a cobbler. There's just so many choices within that meat and 3, but I think that's the beauty, is that you have your choice, but you all go to the same restaurant.
Oh, interesting. I love it.
Yes. So
just another reason to come visit you.
Come down and see me.
There's so many reasons. Well, Allison, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And we got to do it in person, which is so fun. Yeah. And I look forward to the next conversation and hearing how the hemp mine is doing and how the hemp industry is doing and the new research you're doing with the CRC.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you know what? You're invited to South Carolina, and we will tour you on the hemp farm, have meat and 3, go see the Clemson research greenhouses. I think that's where our next show should happen.
Let's do it. I love that. Okay. Maybe we'll do a workshop there.
Yes.
That would be cool. Do you think that there'd be enough people who'd want to come to South Carolina?
Yeah. No,
all right.
Virginia, Florida. Yeah.
Okay. Tennessee.
Yes. Coming on, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Allison. Enjoy the rest of the conference that we're at. We're at the Cannabis conference. And that's it.